Hello everyone, and welcome to today's SAP Community Call. My name is Julia Rousseau, and I am part of the SAP Community team. I am your host during this call. Our topic of this session is digital learning at the speed of change. As always, this call is a recorded session, and you will be able to access all replays of previous SAP Community calls at community.sap.com under the Events tab. Our speaker for this session is Jesse Bernal, SAP Enable Now expert. In this session, he will explain some key learning tools and educational items that you can start to use today in order to keep up to speed on all new technologies with learning journeys, in-application help, cloud trials, and many more. Now, before I hand over, I would like to make you aware of the Q&A button where you can already raise questions during the presentation. You will see it down below in the menu section. Please do not choose the chat option to raise questions. Afterwards, we reserve some time to answer as many questions as we can during this call. So Jesse, the stage is yours.
Perfect, thank you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about learning and education from where is SAP going and where are we going from this transformation and this whole digital change and learning. I don't know how many of you got the chance to listen to Max Wessel and his talk that he did during Tech Ed, but I would recommend going to take a listen to that. And I'm going to share some key highlights and also give some of my insights on what I heard from what Max was sharing. So if you don't know, Max Wessel is our new Chief Learning Officer, and he has started to really look at how learning and education for SAP is changing and how we need to change, right, to better service our customers and make sure that you have the tools that you need and also to get the information that you need at the right time across your journey. So when we start to think about the speed of digital transformation, some of the things that he shared was if you think about your parents and even my parents 20 years ago, their world was a lot different, right? If I think about my parents, they got a job, they stayed in that job. They really weren't looking for this idea of get a job, get some experience, continue to move on. And if you think about people today, I mean, even myself included, I would say it's not a fear for me to think about if I'm not happy to go change and go get a different job, go to a different role. And I think if you think about your parents, they would have got that job and stayed in that role until retirement, right? So if you think about some of those people, even you may be working side by side with right now, they might have been at the job for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I know I came from Johns Manville, so I worked for Johns Manville for almost 15 years. And a lot of people at Johns Manville had been there for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And if we think about their even technology journey within Johns Manville, things hadn't changed a lot, right? So when they first came on, they didn't even have a computer. They were doing things with pen and paper and checking inventory in, and then computers were introduced, and then fax machines were introduced. And, you know, I talked to people there who would, you know, tell me about the yellow envelopes, which some of us remember having a yellow envelope to do intercompany mail, right? Where you physically put things in an envelope, someone pick it up and take it to someone else on another floor. So think about that, right? 20 years ago, things and the way people were thinking about learning and development were very different. And then if we fast forward 20 years later, a lot of those same companies and a lot of the same processes were still the same. So one of the things Max shared, if you think about General Motors was the largest company 20 years ago. And then fast forward 20 years later, right? They were still in that position, right? They still were one of the largest global companies. IBM was the biggest technology leader. Holiday Inn was the biggest hotel chain, and that was the same, right? So even though things were changing, there wasn't a lot of technology speeding up this process. So really interesting when you start looking at it that way. Now, one of the things that I find interesting, and I took this from Carrie Brown, and Carrie Brown has a site or community that you should follow. It's on Future of Work. So if you want to look for that topic page in the community, it's called Future of Work. One of the things she talks about is the reality of learning today and people being overwhelmed, right? So if we think about our world, right? So we talked about our parents' world and things moving slowly and not a lot of technology impacting their learning, through their career. And now I would say it's rapidly increasing. But if you think about yourself, or a user in your business, they don't have a lot of time to learn, right? We all are trying to do 3 jobs, 4 jobs. In the world of COVID today, we're working from home, right? And we're trying to balance educating our kids from home. Maybe you're trying to do your job from home. There's no separation. It becomes a challenge. But when you start to look at people, right, they have on average in a typical work week, 24 minutes, right, for training and learning. You're interrupted constantly throughout your day. So one of the things I look at on here, 9 times every hour, people unlock their phone. So think about how often you unlock your phone when you're working, right? And it's not that you do it on purpose. It's just now it's become a habit, right? You get a text message, someone's messaging you, you see a Snapchat pop up, you see something on Twitter on your phone, you see a news feed, right? So we're constantly being distracted, yet we still try to teach our learners and focus on our learners like we did 20 years ago, right? Let's create a training guide. Let's have them go into a learning management system. Let's assign them a course and assume that in the hour course that I assign them in an e-learning, that they're consuming and comprehending everything that I'm teaching and training, right? I know for myself, and I know for a lot of the people that I work with, when we think about e-learnings and that distribution through a learning management system, very often we know how to play the game. And when I say we know how to play the game, it's we jump into that LMS. We know that there's probably going to be a quiz or test, and we start the learning and we hit play, and then we check email and we get on our phone, and then we keep hitting play. And then when we finally get to the test, we take the test, and if we fail, we take it again. And if we fail, we take it again until we pass. But are we really comprehending, or are we consuming that hour training, right? Could it just have been the quiz? Could it have been a micro learning, right? So we really need to start thinking about our end users and on demand and how we can start to get content to those users through this process. So let's speed ahead. Where are we at today? So again, that digital transformation is accelerating. And if we think about, again, GM, and I'm going to go back to GM because Max talked about this. GM's struggling a little bit, right? So if you think about Tesla and Uber and the sharing economy, right, it's no longer GM in the global market share that they used to be in, right? We now see influences of all these other new startups and new companies that are happening. You have Uber and Lyft with the sharing, right? Think about all the people that are now doing ride sharing. What did that impact in the taxi world, right? What used to be a taxi and the only way you could get around was getting a taxi. Now you can have an app to get a car to get around. When you think about the hotel chain, so Holiday Inn, right? 20 years ago, Holiday Inn was the biggest hotel chain. Now Airbnb is the largest hotel, right? Hoteling offering that we have globally. They have more rooms than any other hotel chain in the world, right? So think about how the world is changing, right? One thing that I think is always interesting when you think about a phone book, right? I think some people even today don't even remember having a phone book delivered. How do we get that information? I know when I first was starting going places, I used to have to use MapQuest and print a map out and take that with you in the car when you were going places. And now we are completely relying on a GPS system in our phone to get us from place to place. And those are the types of things that when we start thinking about learning and the way things are changing, we have to keep some of these items in mind as we're going through this journey. So I think it's interesting to start thinking about where we're going. Now, one of the things that are interesting, again, Max shared some of these points. So any student that started school in 2016, 2 out of 3 of those students will be in a job that doesn't even exist. So if we think about all of these students that started in 2016, which is even not that long ago, some of them are already done with college, right? 2 out of 3 of those students they'll be in a job that doesn't even exist yet. So either the company will have been created, technology will shift, new jobs will be offered, but 2 out of 3 students will be in a job that doesn't even exist today. 1 billion workers will need to be reskilled or trained. So that's huge, right? So if we think about the role that we're in from a learning development, content development role, 1 billion workers will need to be in a new right? New skilled job. They need to learn a new skill. They need to learn a new development platform. They need to know how to interact with a new software platform. So lots of change occurring. Then you think about 133 million new jobs will be created from technology transformation. It's hard to even believe that that's happening, but the jobs that are happening today are going to shift and change, right, as we start to need more data scientists, right? I think one of the roles that are not talked about a lot is the amount of data that we're collecting from, right, Twitter, Facebook, all these different things. We have Qualtrics that collects data, user experience, your GPS signal from your cell phone. Think about all the data that we're putting into the, ecosystem every day, right? There are going to need to be people who can consume and understand that data and help, figure out with companies where they need to go around this, all requiring learning and upskilling. So one thing that I think is exciting, and I think Max brought this to light a lot in the tech ed conversation, is SAP is transforming too. And I think, when we look at this year, our COVID year, 2020, a year like none other, I think we all, even the people who are dialing right now, I think we all have a little bit of Zoom burnout, right? I think we all were pushing the technology to the limit. But if you think about what we had to do, right? Think about all of the schools now that went immediately to remote learning, and we had to start doing things through Zoom, through Teams, through Google Classroom, through all these new tools. I think what's been interesting for me, being an Enable Now expert, helping companies shift to this very quickly, right? We had companies that were still doing classroom trainings. We had companies that would take their training teams and fly from location to location, and they all had to switch to this not in-person, semi-live Zoom experience, even if they didn't want to, right? They were kind of forced down this path. And I think for a lot of this, we proved it's worked, right? But I also think when all of this is over, I think it's going to be a blend, right? I think some people are still going to want to continue to do some classroom. I think some people are going to want the option to go, I'd rather dial in for this, but I'm okay if it's a live classroom and I'm dialing into the live classroom. So I think what I call a blended approach will be more what we see as we start to move forward. I also think what's interesting, I'm in Ohio, and today it's snowing, right? It's snowing today. And one of the things that is already happening is, they're not doing snow days anymore. So even the schools that are going in person, they know they can switch to virtual, right? So they could go, we know a snowstorm's coming tomorrow, take your computers home. We're not going to do a snow delay. We're going to do a virtual day, right? So is the classroom of the future for schools now going to look different, right? Do we expect it to go completely back to the way it was? I don't expect it to be 100% the same as we move forward. Changing market demand. So I think what you're seeing, right, look at the consumer network that's happening right now. I think one of the things that's always interesting, I work closely with Coke and Pepsi and Walmart and a lot of customers that use Enable Now. And what's interesting to see, like, with the consumer brands like Coke and Pepsi, the challenges they're having. Think about all those stadiums that are closed. Think about the amusement parks that are closed. Think about the planes that are not getting that Coke or Pepsi in your hand, right? So when you think, I think a lot of people are like, oh, those brands shouldn't be impacted. Of course they were impacted, right? Think about all of those things that were closed that impact those consumer brands. It's been crazy, right, to see the impact. Then the complexity and ubiquity of the data and scarce resources that you have as a data scientist, as I was talking about earlier, like understanding the data, understanding all the data coming in, the complex models that are happening. And I think what's interesting with SAP is, hopefully some of you have seen this new evolved vision. But I think for me, so being a customer using SAP, right? I was a user, I was a warehouse management configurator in the system, configuring in SPRO, in ECC, right? So ECC3, ECC4, into ECC6. So if we think about where SAP has gone, we used to just be a core ERP system that just focused on what we would call ECC or the GUI or just our SAP transactions. And now as we become this cloud company, and SAP is really committed to being this cloud company, they know where we need to focus is really getting a solid business technology platform and getting all of our cloud systems to talk to each other, but all built on the same platform to be able to cause and create this interactivity across all of our solution suites that we have. So I think when we heard Max talk about this, I think for all people who work at SAP, we know our biggest challenge is everything we consumed, the Arebas, the Concurs, the Field Glasses, the Qualtrics, right? All these different solutions that we've bought, we try to make them talk together, but we all know from a business technology platform, it's not perfect yet. So we know we have to fix the foundation and get everything talking so that we can truly be that, pillar in the cloud world, that we are the best cloud business network that exists, right? Because we do have the right pieces and parts. I think what a lot of you see and we struggle with is how do we get them and all talk together and communicate through this process. So I think this is exciting, but I think it's also great to see, Christian and the board and SAP saying, we know it's something we need to focus on fixing, right? We know it's something that we need to get everything talking on the same platform as we move forward. So really an evolved vision as we move forward there. Now, when we talk about moving to the cloud, right? SAP moving to the cloud and getting what I would say our market share right now from most of our ECC customers are people who used to run core, I want to call core SAP. Most of you were on-prem, right? I was an on-prem customer where I came from. And the thought of moving to cloud, even for me 5 years ago, I know from our technology leader that would have never been the case. We never would have said, let's take our ERP to the cloud. But now in today's markets and how quickly things are changing, I think the cloud has become less scary, right? And I think what a lot of companies are realizing too is even though we say we don't want to take SAP to the cloud, they're technically in their own private cloud, right? So some of you are hosting your SAP on-prem environment in an Amazon cloud. Some of you are doing on-prem in a Microsoft cloud, right? So you all have these different environments where even though it's not the SAP cloud, you're technically already in a on-prem cloud solution, right? Your servers are not physically located in your building any longer. So when we start to look at how do we leverage learning, it's how do we upskill ourselves on all of these things that are occurring, right? SAP is changing so quickly. I think one of the things I struggle with the most is being on the bleeding edge. So going from being a customer using the tool to now being a person who works for SAP, every release, you're learning new stuff, right? And it's like the moment you feel like you know everything about, and I'm gonna use Enable Now as an example, every time I feel like I know everything about Enable Now, you get a release and there's 50, 60, 70 new things to go consume. And it's hard even for an SAP employee to keep up. And then it's how is the user who's using the system keeping up, right? So that's really what we're trying to focus on. How do we keep you up to date? How do we make sure that you're efficient through this process? So some of the things I want to make sure, again, these are some points that Max brought up. When we look at what learning enables, some efficiencies that occur for you, there is about 11% reduction in deployment time. So if you think about implementers, so if you think about either your SI you use, and when I say SI, like if you think about IBM, Accenture, Hitachi, all these different SIs that exist in the world, right? Did you use one of them? Were they skilled? Did they know how to do what they were doing? That can help reduce deployment by 11%. If you didn't use an SI, did you skill your team? I know when I was going live with SAP almost 10 years ago, when we were going live at Johns Manville, we had a technology core team that had to be skilled up on all these new, right, SAP configuration items for ECC. So skilling all of those people inside your department to be ready can help reduce deployment by 11% if they have the right skill and they understand what they're doing, right? That we're not completely reliant on a third party. Administrators. So when we look at post go live and help desk tickets and all the support that comes in, so right, we have the joy of building everything. We think we've built it perfect. We turn it on. We think we've trained, and then help desk tickets start coming in. Right, people don't know what they're doing. But when you look at learning and training, if we have the right materials at the right time to the users, this is an example in SuccessFactors specifically. There was a 62% reduction in tickets with the right materials at the right time in front of those users, right? So you can reduce training, right, with the right learning. Support calls and tickets and all those things with the right training to those users. When we look at end users, let me go back here. End users, you can really get improvements in value drivers. And when you think about value drivers, this is where, are you getting the full total cost of ownership out of your software? Are we driving value with the solution we have, right? So improvements in value drivers, one thing that I think I used to run what was called service delivery, or what a lot of people call the help desk. And when we look at value drivers there, I think there was always a fear of, if the help desk tickets go away, then what's my job, right? And for me, it was, if we shift, right? If we go from being, I'm going to call reactive support to proactive support and start driving value for the business, that's a bigger impact to the company, right? So if you think about all the companies you work for, if we could stop reacting to all these problems, if we could be more proactive on learning, reduce what we're getting called on and putting fires out on all day long, think about the value you could start to drive on. How could I make this better? How could I improve it? Should we look at implementing a new part of solution? Should we turn something on that we didn't turn on, right? So there's a lot of things that can start to change with the right knowledge at the right time. So when we look at innovation, 92% better at innovation, and really that comes from, if you don't have the knowledge of what's changing, and I think a lot of us struggle with this, I struggle with this, right? So keeping up even in the learning and training space of what's going on in the markets other than what I'm focused on, right? So when we think about Enable Now from a training and development tool, there's a lot of things out there that we compete against, right? We compete against WalkMe and WhatFix and Articulate, Captivate, Camtasia, Cornerstone, Saba, right? There's all these different tools. There's hundreds and hundreds of learning tools out there that are not SAP. And do we understand what's going on? But if we don't understand what's going on and we don't enable ourselves to understand other pieces and parts of technology, it's really hard to innovate, right? So the whole point here is keeping those skills up to date really help with the innovation for your company. And then 80% of people who work this 80% people work program at SAP employment rate. So really trying to get people in this whole work program and getting people into work and into jobs using SAP skills that you can upskill yourself on with the tools we have. So when we look at some of the items that are out there today, if you think about the old world of training, what used to happen in the old days, and I'm going to call it the old days, which really wasn't that long ago, 20 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, some of you are still doing this today. So if we talk about old world, it was much more the idea of invest a lot of money at go live. You build all of your content, libraries, you build your training manuals, your binders, everything that you would have, but it was pretty static, right? So you would go live with the system, you would create a whole bunch of training material, you would print binders, you would have training materials, and those would be pretty much those binders and training materials for a long time, right? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. What's happening today because of the cloud world and things that are happening, it's rapid projects. A lot of you are using Scrum methodology or Agile methodology in the new world. So you need to be able to have people being retrained and going through this process continuously, right? A continuous learning process, which changes the way that training is impacted, right? So a trainer that used to be able to create a binder, spend hours and hours with SIs, put binders together, have them printed, make them look beautiful, and we have those and they're good for the next 5 years. Today, those are probably good for 3 months, right? If not less time. So from a go live, especially in a cloud world, we have quarterly releases, some have bi-yearly releases. So you're having a lot of change all the time in the system. And when you're trying to update training materials, it becomes this continuous learning, continuous content development that needs to occur within the system. So when we start talking about old world, and I'm going to move a little bit over to what we call Enable Now, and I want to make sure some of you know this. And if you're part of the community, maybe you're not part of the community, we do have a community page. It's a topic page called SAP Enable Now, and that's where we talk about this tool and the e-learnings and things that it can develop. We're also going to touch a little bit on OpenSAP as well as Learning Hub and some things that are out there, because I want to show you some of the tools that you can actually get into, start using, consuming, and really playing with. So there is a lot of training today created in Enable Now that you can get at no cost and is free, embedded in tools. So S4HANA, Concur, Ariba, Fieldglass, SuccessFactors has a lot of standard Enable Now content already built. Now, the content that's built today, I would call is more old world content, right? It's more of this interactive e-learning simulation. So it looks more like a book page that you click on and go through. You have simulation recordings, which are, right, this idea of I have a recording, it moves me through the process, but it's a go watch something, then go do it in the system, right? Which a lot of us have experience with these types of tools. Then we have documentation or printout guides. So if you think about things that people do today, you might want to print something out and follow along. So then you have these, what I call quick cue cards or quick reference guides, right? Those exist today. And then you have quizzes and tests for knowledge, right? So this is more of that old world approach, right? But today, a lot of our standard content that we provide to you from SAP comes this way, right? We create a lot of it in this e-learning simulation book page, print things out. more of an offline, then go consume in the real world, right? So it's practice mode, not real system, then go in the system and actually do something. So that's really the approach that you see today, right? More old world. Nothing wrong with this approach. And in my opinion, when you start to look through this for yourself, you need to have a blended approach, right? I'm not saying throw all the old stuff out. I'm saying take some of the old stuff, because we have multi-generation working side by side, and you're not going to make everyone happy when it comes to training, right? You can't just go immediately to, which I'll talk about here, the new world, which is where SAP is going, and what you're starting to see in all of our solutions, this intelligent user assistant, and what we call, and what you hear in the marketplace, a DAP approach, right? The digital adoption platform. And there's a lot of tools out there that are in this DAP space, right? So some of our biggest competitors that we talk about, right? So WalkMe's out there in the space, WhatFix is out in this space, Pendo's out in this space, all trying to do the same things, right? And SAP knows that we want to have the right material to the right user on the right page at the right time, providing guidance real time, right? So we know that if we are not building assets for you and content for you and translating it for you and have things to keep you educated on your systems, it's harder for you to renew as a cloud customer, right? It's harder for you to understand how to use our systems, because if you don't know how to use them, why would you renew them, right? So the whole idea here is, how do we get that content directly to your users right on top of the screen? So that changes your whole strategy, right? So when you start thinking about digital adoption platforms and where these go is, how do I figure out what should be a guided tour and maybe what should be a handout? How do I decide what should be a book page and a pre-learning before we go live versus let's just train them directly in the tool? And the reason why I'm saying this blended approach is important is, again, those different styles of learners, what you need on top of the screen, what you don't need on top of the screen. I think one thing when guided tours, I think a lot of people love guided tours, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I love them as well. It's like a GPS system on top of the screen. But think about your phone, right? If you think about your phone and you put an address to go somewhere, your phone helps you get there and you follow those directions to get to that home. But if your phone battery dies, I know for me, I start panicking because I have no idea how to get home. Right? I do not know what road I turned on, where I want, what exit I got off on. And especially when I'm in a town I don't know. So when I'm traveling and I go somewhere that's completely unfamiliar, if my phone is ready to die, I literally will charge it in the phone before I start moving, because I don't want it to have the GPS die on me, right? I want to make sure that it is working, because I don't know how to go back home because I was only paying attention to the guide telling me what to do. And that's that balance when we look at these guided tours or a digital adoption approach is the guided tour that you're building teaching them how to do something, or are they going to use this as a crutch or really as that GPS that if you take it away, they don't know how to do the process? So if the training was turned off, if the DAP platform cannot be reached, if something happens, are you then paralyzing your employee that they don't know how to do any processes without that on, right? So it's just that balance. And I think a lot of people look at sustainment, right? So if you think about long-term, how many of these are you creating? How do I keep them up to date? There's a lot of things to start thinking through when you go through this. Now, again, this is where SAP is going. It's starting to show up in all of our solutions. So when we start to think about like S/4HANA, Fieldglass, Ariba, Concur, all these different platforms and things that you are familiar with, right? S/4HANA has the web assistant turned on by default in cloud. S/4HANA on-prem, there's a configuration guide that you have to go through to get this turned on. Fieldglass, you can get that turned on with your Fieldglass reps to get it turned on in the system. Ariba now has it turned on by default in parts of their system. You'll see more and more coming with Ariba this year. Concur just released their digital library inside their system last week. I think it just got released, so you're going to see Enable Now content inside of Concur as well. So it's exciting to start to see all of our tools starting to really leverage this tool across the landscape. So when we look at all of the content that we have, so really what we're trying to do for you is we don't want you to recreate everything, right? So when we think about learning and training in SAP land, we want you to take all of the stuff you have. So you might have assets in Word, you might have a SharePoint site, you might have different documents, and we want you to take those pieces of content and we want you to get them to the user on the screen. So this whole idea is use SAP content, enrich it with some of your content, figure out what's important, and get it to the user on the screen. So what we're trying to do is don't send the user to another spot to find training, to be lost, to not figure out what they need. And I'm going to use Learning Hub as an example here. Love Learning Hub, use it as a customer, but my biggest challenge with Learning Hub is there's so much content and I sometimes get lost, right? And that's where SAP started this concept of learning journeys to help you get through this chaos, right? Or this confusion, right? So as an end user, you would put things in Learning Hub and you'd say, oh, I'm interested in learning about warehouse management. And you type in warehouse management, and then all of a sudden you get 300 returns. Which WM course do I need to take? I don't know. I don't know what I need to learn, right? And that's what those learning journeys are really there to help you, guide you through this path and journey. So the same idea with this on-screen guidance is, how can you make sure the user has the process document they need, the SharePoint site they need, the Enable Now content they need, the simulation they need, the recording they need, all at the right time on their screen, real world, right? In production, not a training system. How do we make that happen? And that's really what this web assistant is doing for the user. So we're really committed to make things easier. If you haven't had a chance, hopefully all of you know about this, but OpenSAP.com is out there. This has been refreshed. There is a new platform for microlearning. So you have microlearning.opensap.com. So if you haven't gone to the new microlearning site, you can get to it from open.sap.com, but there is a separate microlearning site. New refreshed content that's out there, new refreshed look and feel, but this is what we call our freemium platform. So this is not a cost. You can go out and use OpenSAP to find any of that information you need. Again, you're on the community, another great place for you to find information. So communities have a ton of information out there for you to consume at no cost as well. The Learning Hub, as you may know, there is a free version right now for SAP TechEd. So SAP TechEd was just a few weeks ago. It was December 8th, that week in there. And you can still sign up. So if you still have not signed up for TechEd, or if you did sign up for TechEd, you actually can go register still and get into the free version of Learning Hub and go consume some content, right? So that exists for you today. There are all of the content that was out there is still available. It's available for a while. There's 8 learning journeys you can go through. There's a lot of things on S/4HANA, our new content that's out there, but a lot of things happening there. And one of the exciting things Max talked about is removing this 90-day trial limit. So a lot of our cloud trial systems had limitations. So like S/4HANA had a 14-day trial limit. The cloud platform had a 90-day cloud limit, right? So what we're trying to do is remove some of those trial limits away, where for you to learn, you need to have the tools to be able to try your skill, right? So really trying to get those things in front of you and making sure that you can consume and use those items. So if you haven't used any of those, make sure you go take a look. I want to share something real quick. I'm going to go over and show the S/4HANA cloud trial system here real quick. And what you'll see, if you've never been in here, this is the S/4HANA trial system. You can, if you Google free trials, one of them out there is S/4HANA trial. The web assistant in real time, what I'm talking about from on-screen guidance is this idea of, like here, if I say add a new GL account, it's the idea of having a GPS or content directly on top of your real system, guiding you through the process, right? So for some of you on the phone, you may have seen this, right, with other tools, right? There's other tools out there that do this. And as I said, you heard me say them before, WalkMe, WhatFix, Pendo, all these other ones that are out there. The idea here is this is embedded in the tool. You already have it part of S/4HANA. You can turn on the standard content at no cost. So you could even start playing with this. If you want to go to the trial systems and sign up, you could go to the trial systems, sign up, and even start trying some of this content that exists today, right? So you have basically guided tours. You also have a learning center. The learning center is open to anyone. Again, if you sign up for the trial system, you'll see the learning centers there. And right now, as you see, there's about 1,000 items. If I click on that, about 1,000 items available for you to consume, and they are organized by role. So like if you said, I am a billing clerk and I want to know what content you have for billing clerks, I can go out there. It looks like there's 83 assets for me to go consume for a billing clerk. If I wanted to look at a cash management specialist, right, there's a book page out there for a cash management specialist, but there's one, right? So if I go through these, there's all different types of content that's available by role, right? So if I go out there and I said quality management, or warehouse clerk, right? So I could go through and say, for me, WM is my space, right? That's what I did configuration in. So right, physical inventory or inventory counting, posting goods receipts, reversing post goods receipt, right? So if we think about all the old days, the MIGO GR, GI, TR, or MB1A, MB1B, MB1C type transactions, all that type of training out there that you can go consume. And again, these are simulation recording book pages that if you own Enable Now, you could modify and edit as well. The other thing too to know, there's a link that you can link directly to your community. So you actually can link to a community that you have, either an SAP community you could link to, or you can create your own community inside your company as well. So some really cool things you can do with that within the system. So we're about halfway through our time. So I'm going to open it up for questions and answers, and it looks like some are coming in. So I'm going to look in the Q&A. I don't know if some are in chat. Julie, I don't know if you see any or not. So let's see, we'll go through.
Yeah, at first, thank you very much, Jesse, for your awesome and insightful presentation. So we will open now the Q&A part. So to every participant, feel free to ask your questions either in our Q&A section down below in the menu bar, or if you want to raise a question, I'm going to unmute you and Jesse is happy to answer your questions.
Perfect.
So I haven't seen any questions in our Q&A section down below. So is anyone here who has a question? Please feel free to ask. So I think
again,
you have. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to share, I'm going to share one more quick thing if I have time. So community.sap.com, topics Enable Now. So if you didn't know about Enable Now, you can go find our topic page. The other thing I'll point you to over on the side with related resources, if you're looking for training adoption, Learning Hub, OpenSAP, all of those items are on the side as well. A learning journey as an example, this is just our Enable Now learning journey. Learning journeys, again, if you're using Learning Hub and you're not using a learning journey, you should. Right. So if you are trying to get certified or understand which path you need to go take, go search SAP Learning Journeys, and you'll find a link to help you figure out what content to go consume. And you'll see in here what's free, what's not free. So you'll see there's an e-learning, there's an ebook, there's live access, depending on what you have or where you're at. If there's actually a classroom or an e-learning within inside Learning Hub. But it gives you that path or journey to go through to get to a certification for anything that you're trying to do in SAP. So really take a look at that. Again, as I said, go take a look at our Enable Now community page if you have not. We have other live events coming up where we actually teach you some skills. We have lots of small recordings or micro learnings out there, but lots of content for you to consume as well. So if you found things interesting or insightful, feel free to reach out or take a look at our community page for more information.
There is a question coming in. Thank you very much. So do we need to register separately for Enable Now, or can we navigate to it from the Learning Hub in any way?
Yeah, so for Enable Now, there's a couple things. You can get to the Enable Now content is free. And if you go to the community page, like I just showed you, the Enable Now community page, over on the side for related resources, there's links to all the Enable Now content that you actually can go consume. So there's a whole bunch of pieces there you can go consume that are already Enable Now content you could use. The free trial systems will let you actually play and use some of the Enable Now systems. So if you want to sign up for the S/4HANA Cloud Trial System or the Cloud Platform Trial System, all of those trial systems, almost all of them have Enable Now embedded. So click on the question mark and all of that's going to be Enable Now content that you actually can start playing with.
Perfect. So another one came in from Anke.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. You made a reference to another speaker. Can you repeat the name, please?
Max Wessel was another speaker. So Max Wessel is the Chief Learning Officer and the CLO for SAP. Max did a similar presentation at TechEd. So again, we have what's amazing right now within SAP is we have someone committed to making learning important for SAP, right? We have a Chief Learning Officer who's making sure we're listening to our end users and our people who use SAP and really changing the way and shaping the future of how we get content to you, how we consume content internally, how we consume content externally. So yeah, Max Wessel. Follow him on Twitter. You can find him on LinkedIn. But yeah, great sessions that were out there from him. And there's replays out there. If you go search Max Wessel on Twitter, you can do a replay of his session as well.
So thank you very much. So is anyone want to ask another question? The last chance here. So I think, Jesse, you have answered everything beforehand. So thank you very much for joining this call, everyone. The recording will be uploaded afterwards in our community call page. And if you want to, you can answer our questions in our poll now. I'm going to start it. These are 2 easy questions. So did you find the call beneficial, and would you recommend the call to other colleagues? So thank you very much, Jesse, for this insightful presentation, and have a great rest of the day.
Perfect. Thank you.